Up next, we've got another sort of scientific panel, really digging into the issues in traditional science. It'll be led by Shriya. Shriya actually has started a Bioac podcast. Bioac means bioacceleration. It's one of the sort of key catchphrases you'll see around in DeSci, and is currently studying molecular biology at Harvard. She'll be joined by Kai. Kai is sort of an expert in the biotech space in Germany, and has worked in drug discovery, marketing, and international business relations. And then he'll be joined by Chris. Chris has spanned the clinic, industry, and academia, and has developed patented technology. So has really sort of gone from that earlier stage to getting something patented. And then lastly, we have Hannah. Hannah, who I actually met for the first time at last year's DeSci Berlin, but is one of the co-leads of Nucleate Berlin, and also is a biologist turned VC. So I'm super excited to hear from them. Welcome to the stage.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I just want to start this panel off by, asking why you got into your respective roles and work and what you love about it.
Okay, we'll start from the middle then. So I'm Hannah. My background is in biology and neuroscience research. Originally kind of started off in academia as a very typical scientific background. I'm actually originally from Boston, grew up there and studied outside of Boston. I was in research for a few years, and then I was kind of interested in the idea of startups in the scientific area, but I didn't really know where to get started, which I think is a very typical experience for scientists. I wish I'd had Nucleate around when I was kind of in my research phase, but ended up finding my way into VC kind of through a chance meeting with someone, and ended up finding that it really fit with what I was interested in. So, getting to work with a lot of scientists who are working on really cutting edge research and thinking about how to actually apply their research and spin it out. And I also got, around 2 years ago, in contact with people from Nucleate as it was beginning in Germany. And Nucleate is an international nonprofit that helps scientists spin out their research. So essentially trying to bridge this gap between academia and the startup world and encourage more science to be built into companies. And so that's been a really amazing community to be a part of, and a really good chance to kind of use that framework to try to build up the life sciences ecosystem here in Berlin. So I've also been active the past 2 years with Nucleate, and as I mentioned, investing in early stage scientific startups with Apollo Health Ventures.
I can go next. My name is Chris. I'm a neuroscientist. I actually have the opposite path, so I started in industry. I have a background in engineering, working in robotics, but was interested in learning and tried to go into the lab. So the past part of my career has really been in the lab, working with human patients, also non-patient humans, trying to understand visual processing and visual learning, and then realized kind of that we had a bottleneck in terms of the information you could get in neuroscience. We were really kind of tool constrained, so started developing also tools to understand more about the brain, and so now try to integrate electrical and optical methods to record from the intact brain in animal models. And some of this research has resulted in patents, so we are developing technology for reading and writing from the brain, and so I have colleagues as well who are interested in commercializing or creating products around some of these things, so we start to look at ways of funding this, either going the traditional route through VC, but I've also been following the blockchain space for quite a while, and I'm interested in the possibility of also funding things in this DeSci way, and so it's great to be here.
Thank you. So I'm Kai, I'm a chemist by training, started a classical pharma career in Bale, Switzerland, then came to the biotech industry here in Berlin, failed in 2000, so the company went in insolvency. We started a new company, got into a trade sale, and then later I was becoming active in ecosystem building. First was in a small organization called Biotech, in Brandenburg, just focusing on biotechnology. Later, Health Capital, which is the entire health and life science area. And I have a contract with Berlin Partner, which is the economic development company in Berlin that attracts new companies, that supports startups and existing companies, builds ecosystem, and does all the marketing for the state of Berlin, except of tourism marketing.
All right, thanks everyone. So I wanted to start this off by talking about the different financing models in traditional biotech. And so obviously, bringing anything to market in biotech is an extremely capital-intensive journey. And I think in the past 5 years, we've seen a lot of different sources. I mean, academic grants, strategic partnerships, venture capital, public funding. And so I wanted to get your thoughts generally about these different sources, maybe some of the benefits and challenges for them. And Hannah, since you specifically work in venture capital and also you do run equity-free programs through Nuclea, I'm curious about your opinions on, giving up equity very, very early on in this very capital-intensive process, and how you maybe guide founders into thinking about when is the right time to go to VC.
Yeah, I mean, I think public funding that is in place for academic research and VC funding, of course, they're very different models and they should be applied in very different situations. So, and they also need each other. I mean, I think, venture capital funding is a very high risk, potentially high reward. It needs a company with potential for huge growth. And it's necessary in order to get research to a place where it is a potential VC model. You need to have that non-dilutive public funding for basic research that you don't know is going to turn out anything economically beneficial, but you need to have the freedom to be a little bit detached from the sort of typical capital incentives that you get in a VC model, of course. I think there are also challenges, of course, with the VC model. I mean, there can be great research, great science, great medical applications that are not necessarily VC cases. So this is actually a frustration that I have sometimes in my work, where I can see, meet a scientist, talk to a scientist about the research that is really promising, but it just doesn't have a big enough market to make sense for a VC to invest in it, because VCs need to have the potential to see that 10x, 100x growth. And so I would give an example of cell and gene therapy, for example, as a new, really exciting area of medical research that has a lot of potential to help patients. I think everyone would agree, about the curative potential of this, but the business model is not fully figured out yet. And that's why you see companies who have very successful science still failing, because they just can't make the economics make sense. And so, as a VC, it's frustrating because I come from a science background, not a finance background. And so I'm driven by the science and the tech and, what interesting research I see. And it's frustrating to not be able to invest and help fund projects that I think are great scientifically. So I would love to see other alternatives, to come in and be able to fill that gap potentially without the constraints of this very specific VC model.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a ton of insight into this. I think I'm more exploring. I think that, the amount of money, especially if you want to go into something that is FDA regulated and human trials that is necessary for these, is quite large. And so, and then there's a huge spectrum of science as well, where I think I'm kind of on the border between commercialization of scientific results and then really basic science. And one question I have in the DeSci space, I think in general, is how to fund things across that spectrum. So not just things that will have a product in the next 18 months or 2 to 3 years, but also like long-term, really understanding fundamental principles. And as everyone knows, I think the funding mechanisms for science, pure science, are shaky as well, and a lot of our time is committed as scientists to trying to raise more funding to continue. And if you look at the amount of funding, it's really peanuts compared to, like, for example, the capitalization of a small startup. And so I'm more kind of here as I think observing the possibilities in that space and trying to find long-term funding for basic science with maybe some future commercial possibilities, but yeah, longer term.
Wow, that's a big question, a big field you are opening, actually. So if you are looking in the early phases in Germany, and looking especially here on the German situation, it is not difficult to get state funding. Yeah? So you will get state funding. However, there might be difficulties for the researcher at the university to get some 100,000 validation money. Yeah, one aspect where DeSci could come into a place, actually. So it's really difficult to get money for research towards product development and not to an academic paper or so. Yeah, this is one problem. Then in Germany, it's not too difficult to get some early stage venture, but already at the next round, where you need some couple of millions on the table, it becomes difficult. You need international money, and things then become very, very difficult. And even the international ones, especially the US ones, are very careful right now. So we already learned about the situation since the last two or 3 years. So actually, one of the problems, I think, is, and this might be a problem that is addressed here in this room, this group. So how do we get the money of more people of really into the game, to get early funding and to get this money really to getting very fast to a decision whether it might be good to spend more money or to disrupt a project. So there we definitely all have to learn. And I must say to this community, outside in the traditional finance communities and the traditional science community, there's not much people knowing what is going on.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to follow up on that. So I'm from Boston, so I'm very familiar with the biotech ecosystem over there, and it's like relatively okay. It's accessible to raise rounds there and multi-million-dollar rounds.
Even these days?
Okay, fair. But even with sort of the reduction in VC money for biotech year after year, I still see people doing it. It's not, it's doable. But in Germany, I've been hearing some sort of reports that there's a robust academic innovation. There's robust innovation at that very early level, but there's sort of a loss when you go and in that translational aspect of actually spinning out companies. And so Kai, this question's maybe most applicable for you. But what do you think is sort of the main bottleneck there? Is it like GMP infrastructure? Is it like a financing thing, or tech transfer? I've heard is like relatively fragmented in Germany. Correct me if I'm wrong, but would love to hear your thoughts.
It is definitely not GMP infrastructure. So GMP infrastructure is needed, but I think this is not the bottleneck, actually. So it starts actually with the transfer and intellectual property. In Germany, some of you might have heard of German bureaucracy. Things take a little time, and too much time. So especially if you're funding a company, it takes too much time. And then, of course, each university, each Max Planck Institute, not each Max Planck Institute, but all the organizations, Helmholtz, Max Planck, Leibniz, they have their own organizations. And sometimes it's extremely difficult to just negotiate a simple contract. The problem people have seen, there is a problem, they are working on this problem. And I hope that they come to a solution where it's quite easy that the money, the person that gives the money really fast can come to a contract. This is one of the problems, actually. The second aspect is really German safety. So even a lot of young German scientists would not like to end up in a startup that has financing only for half a year or 2 years. So there's a lot of reasons to stay in the system, to go to pharmaceutical companies and things like that, to have a safety. Whether this safety is really true, I don't know. Sometimes it's not. So actually, it's a question of education to show the chances, to show the positive results. there's a lot of things you could improve.
Yeah, so I have a lot of ideas about this topic via my work with Nucleate and also coming from Boston and kind of seeing both sides of how things work. So I think there are a few things. One is tech transfer, of course. That's a big one. I think there are very different experiences between different universities. It's a younger ecosystem here, so a lot of universities just don't have as much experience as they do in Boston, for example. And so certain places, it goes really smoothly. Other universities, it can be a slog. So it varies a lot. Another topic I would say is, of course, kind of the culture of innovation, but I would say this is also partly has to do with it being a younger ecosystem. So, in Boston, you have the sort of culture of academic research more closely tied to the culture of startups and entrepreneurship, and also just because of geographic, it's very close together, all of it in Boston. And because it's a more developed ecosystem, you have more scientists who know people who have gone and spun out companies, and people who have kind of role models in that space. And here, you're starting to get that more, but you have fewer examples that young scientists can look to of people who have actually gone that path. But this is something that is changing. This is something we're trying to work on with Nucleate as well, by bringing together people who are in research to show them examples of what it can look like to spin out your research to build companies and sort of close that gap between the entrepreneurial side and the academic side. Another challenge that I see is bureaucracy, not just in tech transfer, but in kind of founding companies, and just setting up a company in Germany can be quite paperwork intensive. But this is another thing that there's really good progress on. So for example, maybe some of you have heard of EU Inc., the European-wide company structure that's been proposed and pushed by a Berliner, actually, Andreas Klinger, who started a petition that kind of got a lot of traction and has now been taken up by the European Union, and they're planning to set up a digital-first, European-wide, startup-friendly company structure that should streamline a lot of this paperwork. So really positive movement in a lot of these directions. Funding is, of course, another challenge. As you also mentioned, I would say there's a lot of good early stage funding in Germany, but there are a few gaps that need to be filled, and kind of later stage funding can be a challenge and is still something that needs to be done globally a lot of times.
Yeah, I think you guys covered most of the big points. I would say, just to underline, I think culture is a big aspect, and the unwillingness maybe to make this risk, to this jump from academia into a startup with a much more uncertain future. But that the community also, I think, especially building this community so that seems like less of a risk because you know more people who have done it, you have more support structure, you see a path. Whereas if you're really in, I think, the academic structure, it can be hard to necessarily see this bridge if you're coming from a Max Planck Society, for example. Or so even though they have a good innovation office and I think a well-developed, kind of patent structure there, I think building the community is huge, and maybe DeSci can also really play a role in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we've been talking a lot about, the biotech landscape, concentrated more in the US, how, capital markets have kind of dried up over there. I mean, we're seeing a decline of IPOs every year. We're seeing fewer overall M&A deals, which usually goes up, I believe, when capital markets tighten, but we're seeing that go down as well, maybe an FTC thing, I don't know. But, there's a reason this panel is called Bottlenecks in Biotechnology Innovation, because there are definitely many. And so we talked about Germany a little bit. I want to expand out maybe to US and global markets, what you think the main bottleneck is. From what I see, it primarily seems like a financing problem. I was reading the stat somewhere that like 90% or something of biotech startups fail because of funding. We're seeing VC rounds go down year after year. So these trends, for me, it seems like that's primarily the problem, but I know in the US there's lots of other problems. Regulatory is getting a little more challenging. So curious just to hear your thoughts about some of those trends and maybe how you would encourage young founders who want to build in biotech to navigate that, that climate right now. And I'll start with maybe Kai, if he wants to.
So life science, especially biotech, has been and probably will be for long years a very difficult market because it's a highly regulated market. So in contrast to many other industry, it takes a long time even to start a digital application. It's not just the pharmaceutical product that takes 10 years. So think of diagnostics, digital applications, whatsoever. So this is a big problem. You mentioned the aspect of regulation. There is little help available for those guys starting. And if you come, I should not talk about Berlin right now, but for the LAGESO or European institutions or even international institutions, this is a difficult thing really to have the right experiments, the right protocols on the way because you could commercialize the product. So it is not just the finance, and I will stop with this.
Yeah, I mean, I think globally, I would say one of the bigger challenges that I've seen in the past couple years with biotech, life science funding is funding at the later stages. So I think there starts to be a little bit of an imbalance between the amount of funding and therefore kind of the valuations that you can get at early stages versus more growth stage funding. And so there you have a lot of companies that do okay at the early stages and then run out of funding and can't scale. And so, and also this kind of goes along with the more limited exit pathways. So it's for a VC model, those are things that you need. You need to know if you're investing early stage that there will be growth stage funding, that the value of the company will continue to increase, and then there will be exit pathways. So this is a challenge along the whole pipeline. So, I mean, I guess I would advise anyone who's getting into life sciences, biotech, entrepreneurship that, I mean, it is a challenge. It's a super risky area to be in, but also in the world of startups, contrary to kind of the culture of academia, failure is normal. Like, it's also fine. If you work on something and it doesn't end up working out, you gain so much from that experience, you learn so much from that experience, and that's also kind of part of the process. So I would say, I mean, I still think it's worthwhile to try to bring this research to patients and to really take what's in academia and make it applicable. That to me is something that's really worthwhile to do. I don't have the solution for the funding issues. I do think that, you know, there are a lot of opportunities, for example, for VCs who want to look in Europe to find lots of talent, which, you know, it's less expensive to build companies here. There are certain ecosystems like Boston that are great, but are also really oversaturated, and it's very expensive to build companies there. So maybe we see a little bit of a decentralization of the sort of innovation hubs. But I don't know, I don't have the answers. I see a lot of the problems, but I would say it's worth going for it anyway, because I think biotech is only going to continue to be a more important field.
Yeah, I think I would highlight two other things in the culture of academia maybe. I totally agree. I think in Europe in general, there's great innovation, great academic innovation. But one thing has to do with the way research is done in academia. It's really more of a proof of principle. And so people focus a lot of effort and work into getting something to work. They show that it works, and then they move to the next thing, the next stage that they want to show, rather than trying to solidify around, you know, for example, reproducibility or getting it to work in someone else's hands, trying to make a commercial product, which is a huge jump. I mean, you don't just go from like a lab result where you can get it to work in this lab, in this conditions, to something that you can put in a box and ship, you know, across the world and have it work then there. I think about this specifically in my case of trying to get brain implants. You can get it to work in some hands. You know, there's a lot of kind of knowledge that can't just be maybe easily encapsulated in terms of how you do the surgical procedure, for example, and have that reproducible. And so there's awfully not the effort put into this in terms of maybe making video guides or having some sort of, kind of documentation around getting this reproducible, because there aren't incentives in academia for this necessarily. I think it's changing a little bit, but that's one. The other thing I think has to do a little bit with the conservatism of science in general, where it is a very skeptical enterprise. You want to doubt a lot what you see, and so that also means you don't necessarily see what you're producing as the best thing and the solution to some problems, but you see all the faults with it and the reasons that it shouldn't work for this thing and that, which is really ingrained, I think, in the training for science. And so it makes people a little nervous to then really kind of overpromise something and say, oh, this is going to change the world. And so on and so forth. So I think those are two big issues that I see that are more on the academic side.
One idea. So there's, of course, one big game changer, and this is AI. Use certain development costs. So allowing communities that are not so old and experienced and so rich, like Boston, to play an important game. It brings, of course, other competition in the game, which is definitely China. So China, for lots and lots of years, everybody was thinking, okay, they are quite good, but they are not advanced enough. Now they are advanced enough. So there's a lot of competition coming from China.
Yeah, definitely agree with AI reducing development costs. And Hannah, you bring up an interesting point in that, later stage financing is probably the trickiest thing. And I'm not sure if that's because there's just less money, or maybe, these companies are not great with like capital allocation at that stage, or maybe the technologies themselves are more expensive. Like you mentioned, cell and gene therapies, like scaling those can be quite capital intensive. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. It looks like we don't have too much time, so I want to end this on an optimistic note. We've been talking a lot about what are the failures in biotech, and I wanted to ask you what trends, maybe technologies, applications of tech are you excited about in your field?
Okay, I'll start. I mean, one thing that I mentioned as a challenge, cell and gene therapy, is a challenge for business model reasons, but it's also something that I think will be figured out, and I think scientifically is really exciting. And I think there's in general, a movement of biology from more of a science to more of an engineering discipline. So we have the ability and the understanding to be able to do things like cure diseases that was just not possible before. So I think that's really exciting. Neurotech is another field that I find super interesting, just kind of increasing advances in neuroscience, in electronics, and in AI combine to make neurotech a really interesting field at the moment. I just got back from a conference in Canada of the BCI Society, which was really interesting, just seeing all of these researchers and companies that are working on those topics. And I would say a move towards more preventative medicine and longevity topics, which can be quite a mixed bag scientifically, but I think is really interesting to see a lot of scientists tackling diseases at the earlier stages and looking more towards prevention than just reacting when diseases are already more advanced.
So the long-term trend for biotech and life science is intact and is great. So whenever a company failed, and I've seen a lot of companies failing, all the people working there went to a new company and the number totally is growing. And now we are really in the situation on this general intact trend. We are changing from illness to health. So this is longevity, and there's a lot of black magic and stupid things within longevity, but the awareness that we not only would not like to be ill, but we would like to stay healthy and feel good, I think this will bring enormous amount of ideas and power and money into the system, so I'm very optimistic for the future.
Yeah, I would also just say I think there's never been a better time to do basic science or translational science. I think the technological developments, especially in the biomedicine field, have been astounding in the past decades. And yeah. Also, I think there's more money. Even if maybe it shrinks in some terms, I think there's plenty around. So yeah, I think it's a great time.
Great. The tech bio revolution is here. Thank you guys so much.
You have to leave, huh?
Thank you.